Hi, my name is Hananya.
Hello there, my name is Shameem.
And my name is Leslie. We're three international friends on a mission to write and publish our first novels. We are the Three Writing Amigas. Hello.
Hi.
Hey. We're having a little technical discussion. You know, because we're so technical. Well, I should say, I'm as a joke to myself, I'm so technical. Not.
What's the subject?
I was just video editing and stuff.
Yeah, just editing and color correction, you know, when sometimes our colors are very off
Bit
because we're in
off.
3 different locations and, you know, different lighting and everything.
Yeah.
And speaking of lighting, do you notice? No
yeah.
reflection.
Oh yeah, nice. And you
but
also cropped the camera very well so that you don't see the top of the picture, so it doesn't look that crooked.
Thank you.
It still looks a little bit off.
Yeah, but I can't get it perfect.
But it's only if you look at it, you know.
Yeah. And hopefully they're not looking
Like
at my
who's really
my
gonna be
picture.
like,
Yeah.
you know.
Let's hope. But you should see what's jerry rigged in front of me to get rid of the reflection.
Can you take a picture, please?
I will.
Can you do behind the scenes on the recording and post on Instagram, please?
Okay, we will do that. So this is for behind the scenes. I'm going to do it while we're on so that we can
of
have
course, that's what I mean.
Oh God, look at my desk. Oh dear God. Okay, we're going to do it as a
Yeah.
video. We'll do it as a video.
we get
We'll do
to
it as
see-
a video.
We get to see the real.
The real. Yeah.
The real. Okay, here we are. Wave, everybody. Hello. This is the Amigas. Now going up, this is how I have jerry-rigged to block out my window so that it doesn't have a reflection on my painting. Oh my goodness, this is so crazy. There you go. That's 20 seconds too long, but yes,
That's fine.
we'll
We
have
can
it.
cut it. It's okay.
Yeah. But I was so proud of myself. And actually we have a better solution, but this was like this morning, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna try. I had an idea. So my poor husband, I was like, get down here and help me. You know.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say, because I know that we're going to talk today about prepping for our edits and stuff like that. And we've all kind of done it, you know, slightly differently. I don't know if you guys feel this way, but I just feel it's so weird. You know, when you're writing your book and whatever struggles you are having or not having, you know, there are the days where the words are flowing and you get it, you know where you're going. And then there are the days where nothing's coming and you're struggling, or you know, you have to write a specific scene and, you know, whatever. I just feel like right now I'm developing this whole new relationship with my story because it's complete. I mean, even though you need editing, but the story is like complete. And it's, I don't know, it's just really interesting. You know, I don't know. Do you guys feel that way? Did you felt like you had a baby?
I'm not there. I'm not there yet. So I'm a ways behind you two, I think. So
Have you
What
not
do you
started
mean?
editing?
yes, I was waiting until we get into the moment or whatever. Or we in the moment.
We're in the moment now. We're in the
Okay.
moment. So how are you starting? How are you approaching? Like, what are you thinking that now that you're really at the beginning and Hananya and I have we're not that far ahead of you, but we started a little bit. So since
Yeah.
you're just starting, how are you approaching?
So last time we met, I was having a nightmare because I was trying to edit digitally with Dabble. And
Oh, right.
and if you remember, I wasn't getting very far because I was editing, but then I was editing my edits, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So I think I only got to chapter 3. And when we last spoke, you both were recommending to me that I should print and take myself away from my Mac. So I printed it. And not only, I don't know if you can see, but that's the beginning.
Uh-huh.
And I literally have this teeny bit left to do.
To read. Oh,
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's like
To
first
make
edit.
notes.
Yeah. So I did it. So I did just single. So I broke all my rules. I did single page, killed lots of trees, I got lots of white space, so lots of margins, lots of, and each page has a space, so I can like write lots of my crazy, insane notes next to it.
Yep.
And it's been so hard not to go to the digital and start editing, as in start doing my corrections.
Yep.
But I deliberately, not on my Mac, I either go into the kitchen or I sit on the sofa with my multicolored pens. I love pens.
Good.
And then doing all that. And I got a teeny bit left. And I have not looked at it. I have not touched the digital version. And I've done more editing. Well, I've nearly edited the first edit. I've nearly completed.
That's fantastic.
And for 3 months or 2 months, whatever it was, I couldn't get past chapter 3 because I was just stuck in my head, stuck. You know, I couldn't move forward. So, and I have managed to somehow read it and disconnect myself from being the writer of the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I'm writing notes saying this doesn't make sense, or you need to add more narrative here, or add more details here. And I've stopped myself going to do what I want to do. I just want to go and make it right, and I haven't made it right, so it's killing me. But I am.
But don't you feel like now that you're really, because you printed it out and because it's a completely different medium, right?
I see it so differently. I'm reading it differently, and I'm reading it. I think I'm reading it like a reader, rather than, and I'm looking at it. I mean, you know, now I'm realizing how much work I've got to do because I've spent so much time. I don't know about you two, but I've spent an inordinate amount of time in the first half of my book, and not in my second half. So as I've got through, I was like, Jesus Christ, Shameem, this is shit. I just remember like reading your story and think, and there was one chapter where I thought I didn't connect. Well, holy shit, I have tons of that.
Yeah, but don't forget. Okay, so first of all, like the first chapter, especially that first chapter.
Yeah,
it is so, and I've changed some things now, but at the time when you guys, like, it was so well done because I sat there for how many times I keep going back and editing that first chapter instead of moving forward.
My first chapter. My first 3 chapters are brilliant because I have edited them probably like 50 times.
Exactly. Yeah. Because it's a procrastination thing. We all go through it. Yeah. And, you know, especially, and I think you're feeling the same way, when I'm just editing on the computer, if I don't print it out, I will sit there in the computer for like basically those first 3 chapters and make them amazing. And the rest of the book is
still sitting
done. Yeah. So,
and it feels overwhelming to be like, oh, I've only gotten 3 chapters done. Whereas if you see it on a different medium, like you see it in a different way, so then you're almost not noticing how far into the book you are when you're reading it. So even if you don't want to print it out, I've done it on my iPad before, and I've just I have the Apple Pencil, or not anymore because I broke it, but I bought a different cheap pencil, and basically you can just write next to it, or did that. That was one of my first passes through my book, was just writing digitally next to it, because I felt like doing it on paper and writing in the margins wasn't it. I don't know, somehow it didn't work for me, at least not the way that I printed it. There was not enough space to really write stuff, so I did it digitally, but kind of as if it was a book kind of PDF kind of thing, so you could just write on the side. So that's how I went through it for the first time, and that really helps kind of not being in that writer mindset, but more in a reader mindset, because you're not actively looking at, oh, my little dash is pinging for me to write more,
right?
You know,
it's
just it's flat.
It's very addictive,
and you can't change it right away. You know,
it's not showing you what you
it's not like that little blinking thing that's constantly reminding you that you should be writing or changing something, you know, it's completely flat.
I was addicted to my cursor.
Because that's what we're used to, if it's a email or whatever, we're used to making it perfect, and so it's hard to leave things that are not correct and move on when it's on the computer. But a good point that you made, Hananya, when you do that, if you do, whether you do it the way you did, on your iPad, or you want to print it out like we do and how I love, you've got to, this is an editing manuscript at this point, an editing draft or whatever you want to call it. So you have to be mindful of that and make sure you're double spaced and you have enough margins, because you do need to write
you need
stuff.
the space.
Yeah, you need the space for that. And then, and later on another time when we talk about beta readers, you're gonna need a lot of space.
Yeah, but it also helps seeing your manuscript in like a completely different way, because you're so used to seeing it in your word processing tool, no matter like what kind of program you use. Like if you use Scrivener or Dabble or Word or like whatever you're using, if you're just seeing it in a different way, so even if it's a PDF somewhere, or if it's like printed out, or some people transfer it to their like Kindle app or even their Kindle, and they start reading it that way, like it just helps seeing it in a completely different kind of format that makes your brain register in a different way. And I think that is the beauty of doing that, because then you're really looking at your book with kind of fresh eyes, even though it's the same eyes that are looking at it, but it makes it look different or feel different. And that way you can really kind of catch the things that you wouldn't get if you're just looking at your word processing tool.
100%.
At least in my opinion.
No, I mean, I totally agree. The other thing is not your first time through, but once you've gone through it once and you've taken care of the really big stuff, the obvious stuff, and we'll break down some of those thoughts of how we do stuff. But then on your second time through, to read it out loud. That is so key. And so many people don't do that, because what happens with your brain when you have typos or you miss words, your brain fills it in, because you know this story so well, right? Already. And so you don't catch them. So you have to read it out loud, each word. And it's amazing how sometimes, because if it trips over your tongue, it'll trip over your brain too. Like it's weird, right? So the more fluid it is to read your words, the more fluid it'll be to read out loud, I should say. The more fluid it'll be to read internally. So that's another, kind of path. Yeah, did you guys let it rest at all? Because you know how everyone says, I do let it rest. Did you let it rest?
Yeah.
And that helps too.
It does help, because then you're like a little step away from it as well. The thing that I did though, when you said the whole reading out loud, the way that I did that, because I'm dyslexic, so I'll fill in the words anyway, no matter what is on the page. I'll just come up with a different sentence when I'm reading it, and that is like very difficult for me to kind of catch the mistakes. So what I did is I just kind of did chapter by chapter. I plugged it into like a speech or text to speech kind of thing, so that it would read it to me, and then I could hear if it sounded weird. So that's what I did. So it did like text to speech, and then I was reading along with it and catching where it was like weird in my ear. So that's what I did instead. So that's also a way that you can do it instead of reading it out loud yourself. But it's amazing, because then you can read it along with the I mean, it's a computer generated voice, right? It's not going to be perfect, but it does kind of catch the things that you're like, wait, that sounded off. And then you can change that and like pause it and go back. So that's how I did kind of one of the earlier edits that I did on my story. Just kind of catching those things. I was like, that sounds weird.
I think that's brilliant. It wouldn't have occurred to me to do that, but I think that's
great.
A really great
I would
idea.
recommend it.
Yeah.
And so you can't do like long, you can't do the whole book. Like you could, if you, for example, load it into your Kindle app on your phone or something, you can, even if you have an iPhone, I know how to kind of get the screen to read. So it can read the Kindle and it will just like keep going if you want that to happen. So I've done that before as well, but not necessarily on my stories, but on other stuff. But that is also a way that you can do it if you don't want to plug it into something. But
so what did you use to do that? There was a program that you used, or
I literally just typed into Google like text to speech and then online or something like that, and then it came up with something. And I think it sometimes maybe even limits to like an X amount of minutes that you can do, or X amount of words, whatever. But at the time when I was doing it, it was free. I could do a chapter by chapter. Because you can't paste like more than 5,000 words, I think, into it at one time. But it was great. And even I think like text to speech is probably there for like tons of apps or different plugins or stuff like that. Because like obviously, like people that are blind need that. So there's going to be plenty of tools for that. Even on iPhone, it has like the whole read screen function. which you
I
can
wonder,
use.
I don't know if it has it for Android, because, of course, I have an Android.
I'm an Apple girl, so I don't know.
Yeah,
but
I'm
also,
Apple,
I
but-
noticed that Word has a microphone. I know you can read into Word.
Yeah,
I wonder if it reads
speech
back to you.
to text.
Yeah, no, it
Speech to
does.
text.
It does. It's called
sure
it's called accessibility software.
Yeah,
Because
Okay.
I do
that's it.
I do a lot of that. It's for visually impaired, hearing, different hearing abilities depending on frequencies, things like that. But yeah, so
Okay.
definitely.
This is something I want to, and I'm not in Scrivener yet, although I have it, and and Hananya was kind enough to do a tutorial with me. I started to try to put my novel into it, and I think it's just harder to go that way. So I decided for this one, I'm going to wait until the end. I learned how to import the final draft into it. So I'm going to wait for that. So right now I'm still working in Word. But I was going to say, this is a kind of thing for Scrivener in the future, if they don't have it now, whatever you call it, an option. It would be a great option, because it's a wonderful thing for writers to be able to hear the words, whether you're reading it. And I think that this idea of having the computer read to you is great, because when you're having to read it yourself, like, it's really tiring. And in a way, sometimes I would find myself, oh, wait a minute, did I listen to what I just read? Because, after a while, you start to kind of check out. So
yeah, and it's also like, sometimes people are weirded out, like I'm weirded out about, like, reading out loud on my own in my room, like that. It feels weird, even though it's not weird, but like it feels weird. So then having something read it for you can kind of get you out of that, like, this feels weird kind of mindset,
Right.
That also.
And also, go ahead. What? Sorry.
No, I just think that's a really good idea. I didn't think of that. So
I know, it's such a good idea. Well, Scrivener, listen up. There's a new feature you should have. Just telling you. So okay, good. Oh, right. So we all let it rest, which is good. Yeah. Really important. And then for me, initially, at least, my next step after letting it rest and then reading through it and writing stuff, I like to just attack the really big stuff. I don't, even though I make notes for words, like word changes or punctuation and because it's so much, it's like, it feels like if I break it down. So I like to try to fix really big, like, scenes that don't work, or you need a new scene in there or whatever, because it feels like, to me, very much like filmmaking, it's partially puzzle and it's partially a dominoes effect. Because if you end up having, to change chapter 3, that affects chapter 12 or whatever. So that's what I do. Does that, you guys have,
Yeah. It's different for me. That is, I think, the most overwhelming part about editing. The whole domino effect, because if you start changing one thing, then you got to change everything. It's not just, I'll tweak this and then everything will start. Like, if you change one thing, it might ripple down throughout the full story. And that just is sometimes overwhelming when you're like looking at it and like, oh God, now I'm gonna have to change this. I'm gonna have to change that. I'm like, I'm gonna have to make sure that I remember to change it when I get to the later chapters. Like, it's that part of like editing that sometimes scares me, because then I'm like, am I gonna remember all of it? Like, is it all gonna make sense? Is the flow still gonna be fine if I change all of this? And then I can get into my head, and I just need to remind myself to do it one chapter at a time, and just kind of not try and overwhelm myself, but just focus on that one chapter I'm doing. But it's definitely going to be, writing, I feel, is 90% really loving what you do, because if you don't, you're going to read your story like 15 million times.
That's right.
So you really got to love your story.
You got to love it. You got to, I'm big on leaving myself notes, because you're 100% right. Like, I have a change. I realize, in chapter 2, I really need this scene. Right. And so I put that in, and then it's going to affect in, 10 and 20 and whatever. I try to go and find those places, and just in caps, I do caps, because that's what kind of, and I'll write, need to blah, 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 refer to page blah, 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 or chapter 2, this, so that I have like roadmaps, because by the time you get down there, you may not remember what, because you have the other old story still in your head. Right. Yeah, because otherwise you can be like twisting yourself in knots thinking, well, if I have to change this now, then I should go and change that, because you don't know. It's like a living thing when you're editing, right?
Definitely.
Your story, it shouldn't be like, I know everything. Even I think even nonfiction, that's true. Because, like in docs, that would happen to me all the time. I would change something here and realize, oh, you know what? I need to change the point of view of this story or whatever. So I mean,
or like if you change this, then the whole story becomes kind of different, because this is the key moment, and if you change that, then like it ripples down to like how you're telling the story, so you might have to flip things. And
that's right. Have you run into that, Shameem, in this pass you're doing? Have you changed?
I haven't got to making the changes, but I know, as an example, I know there's a chapter that needs to come forward that is towards the back. So I know that's going to affect something else. And I just picked up stupid stuff where one of my characters had a job in the beginning, and then somehow she's got a different job in the end, in the middle or the end. And I'm like, how did this happen? That kind of thing. Just making sure that there's consistency throughout with the different characters, because I know I've noticed that I've started to embellish some things which I just forgot that I think that's because the difference is between spending so much time in the front versus not much time at the back.
But also, by the time you get to the end, you've forgotten most of what you did in the front. You know what I mean?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, even though you still remember like the big picture stuff.
Yes.
Some of the details you're gonna be like, what did I say this was again? You have to like go back or like write it down somewhere. But
do you know how many times my main character's appearance changed?
Right? It's like
green eyes, gray
eyes.
What
was their hair color again?
Tall,
this is why you have character profiles.
Exactly, because I'm like,
well,
I don't know.
That's a good point, because I have, I have a detailed plan. I have my characters, I have my profiles, I have all that information. I don't look at it. That information, I don't look at it.
I don't look at it either.
Nearly enough. And as you two were talking, I see so many posts of writers that have physical storyboards, and I really feel like I would love to have,
it would help, a
nice big whiteboard. I love post-it notes. I love them. And and I know we have Trello, but I don't open Trello.
It's different.
I don't understand why I don't look at Trello, but
it's different. It feels different.
Well, because you can't see it all together. It's the same thing going back to printing out your book, because when you print it out, you can go, and it's something, I don't know, visual, tactile, I don't know. In film, doc or not, we always have like a
scene
whole
cards.
Scene cards. And that's what Trello is, and that's what Scrivener has as one of their things.
As a function,
But to see it on your little screen, it's not the same.
So different.
So different. So I didn't do that for this book, but I realized I really need that. But what I have used a lot, and I was really glad that we had to do it, was that plot summary. And I probably did a little bit more in my plot summary than they kind of asked for, because I really wanted to, I did, so chapter 1, and I have all the main things rather than just the 2 main things, for like the point of each scene, so that I can, because you forget. And if your novel is multi-layered, as let's hope it is, because then, more stuff going on, you can't, like, where did that come in? And so I use that a lot, which I still would prefer a board, but at least I think that's been really helpful.
I'm going to have to write that down. So if you've got a plot summary, that means I've got one, doesn't it?
You've got one. It's there.
You've got one.
You did it. And you may find that you're going to add to it. But it's going to change. It's going to change, and you may add to it just because these are the points that you want to make sure you remember. But it's super, super helpful. And if you can't have an actual storyboard, then that's the second best thing, I think, because also you can print it out, and it's only going to be 10 pages or 7 pages. It depends on how long your book is. And you can flip through it. But to be able to go, oh, that happened, and then this happened. Right? Because that's the thing. You can't remember even 3 or 4 times through your book,
Exactly.
And you can also look at, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, sorry. Which is, I think, why I enjoy Scrivener, because you can have like the scene card idea per like document or whatever you're using. I always categorize it in chapters. I know that's not recommended and you should do scenes, but it's just how my brain works. I do chapters.
Yep.
But you can write down like the main things and that will show up in the scene card, but also just on the side of that chapter, you can see it if you're writing that or if you're referencing it, and you can be like, okay, this was a short summary of this. So you can kind of look it back at it as well. But this is also the main reason why I dedicate a notebook to every single project. So I have a separate notebook for each book that I'm like actively really trying to improve. Not when I'm first drafting it, because then it's like, yeah, it's just I'll draft it and then I'll see. But when I'm like actively really working on it, I will have a notebook dedicated to that project. So
and what do you put in there? That's interesting. What do you put in that notebook?
This is my notebook for my my historical book. Basically the way that this notebook started, you can see that it's taped together because it's falling apart. It started me writing down the story.
Then.
It started with me actually physically writing down this story. So it's literally me handwriting it.
Wow.
When I first started writing it.
I don't think I could do that. My hand would cramp. I mean,
That's how I started writing this book. I got about 20,000 words in
handwritten. In your notebook? Oh my God.
Yeah. So all of this, I'm gonna try and hold this up. I know that the people that are just listening to this can't see, but this is like the part that was handwritten.
Wow. That's like
it's a lot.
Almost an inch of paper.
And I think the way that I did it is I basically wrote down a like ish chapter that I would feel like was a chapter. And then I'd go back and I would like type up what I'd written. But that was like instantly kind of a way to edit through some of the stuff that you were doing, because it's like, oh, well, maybe I should change this sentence a little bit. This doesn't make sense. Like, I'll just rewrite a little bit. So that's like instantly kind of an edit moment when you do that. And I loved it. But at some point, like my brain started moving too fast for my hand to keep up. So I was like, I need to type this up because that's just going to flow better. So that's what I started doing. But I started making notes on the read through. So I did a read through and I colored in whenever I did a chapter. So like trackers and stuff.
Love it.
And then I made a chart of like all my characters and like what chapters they are in. So I could see, oh, this character only really shows up in like 2 chapters. That's weird. Or like moments where it's like
a project management
kind of, but it's smart.
I use it for everything. So I did this, and like in this I know that like my chapters are going to change. So this is not the full thing. Like this was in the very early stages, but I basically had a chapter where Emilia has all of her loved ones kind of come visit her. And there was one character that wasn't there. And I was like, but he's so important. Like, why is this person not visiting her? That's so weird. And I only realized because I did this chart. And then I used it for like chapter summaries, and I've drawn like a little map of how I think like the castle ground looks and like stuff like that, like just notes, you know. So I've done chapter summaries of the chapters and also what day approximately it would be in the story day, so that I would know like, okay, well, this is the same day, this is in like a few days later, or like stuff like that, so I can kind of keep track of the timeline. And I wrote down like my word count before the edit, after the edit, how many words I've added, because I like that kind of stuff. I'm a tracker person. And then I did like an edit to-do list of like big picture stuff. So this is just like find passive voice was like one, but also don't over explain, don't info dump, think of time and era setting, stuff like that. Just so like big picture stuff, and then like more trackers, and then feedback. I've written down in here as well per chapter. So I would go into a chapter and be like, okay, well, this is all the feedback on this chapter. And then I'd like write it down. So that's what I've done. More chapter summaries. And let me see. Also, the coaching stuff is in here. So whenever I joined a call and I had specific questions, I write it down here. So that has like all of that in there. And then I started reading the Time Traveler's Guide, which is like the research I guess I'm doing, and I start writing down some notes on that to kind of be like, okay, this is interesting information to maybe add into my story. So that's just kind of what I keep in here. So it's just kind of a combination of everything that I think would be useful. So currently, as I'm like editing, I basically just grab my chapter notes. So this is like all the notes that I have on specific chapters of like, okay, what should I be changing in this chapter? And I just kind of go through it as I'm editing, and I'm be like, okay, these were the big things I wanted to change in this chapter. And then I go through that and I start crossing off the things I have done. Off. Yeah.
Wow.
And then I can go back and be like, okay, what did I change in the previous chapter again? And then continue. And it's just nice. I like having paper kind of next to me as I'm doing this, because like screen just gets me too distracted. So sometimes I'm just like screen and then paper, screen, paper. It's just, I don't know. It's something about paper that just helps me sometimes. So
can I just say something? Because I know I'm going to say y'all, American idiom. Y'all sometimes make fun of me because I still print things and I don't know about.
No, I'm all here for it.
I'm like, it makes me so happy to hear you say that. Yeah. Because there's something about it that just, I don't know, it just gives me a different perspective. But a couple of things I want to say on that book that I think is really smart. I learned so much from you, because I do that for a film. Why am I not? A story is a story is a story.
Exactly.
Right?
Why are you not doing this?
And I don't know. I apparently, for books, love to have scraps of paper all over the place. Can't find anything.
This is why I dedicate notebooks, because it's just much easier.
Yeah. I
have another one here as well. And then I have another one.
I think that's brilliant. And I'm going to start doing that. I'm stealing it.
It's nice.
But I wanted to say two things about what you said, which was so great, because about how you do that. First of all, you're doing your plot summary. You just do it differently, right? Because you have your chapter. That's what it is. But you're having more like page, and you can have more notes attached to it, which is, I think, really great, rather than, just the little list, the bullet point thing I have, because I have no place to put notes with it. But the big thing, at least this was really big for me, and I think it's going to be big for a lot of people. And I want to make a point that, which I think is one of the brilliant things about what you're doing. Timeline.
Yes.
Let me just tell you the troubles that I have had in my book because I have screwed up the timeline. I had notes that Anna, one of the coaches, even said to me, she answered the question for me, because I had notes in there going, is today Sunday? Like, I was so lost in the timeline of my story, because you get so invested in the characters and their motivation and the plot and the blah, 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 that I was making all this stuff like all happen in a week, which was impossible to have happened. Yeah. And it's a big deal, because how you're transitioning to a new chapter, are you talking about, is the storm still going, or is it the next day, or,
exactly.
It affects it. And so, love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I have a big timeline problem in my story, and I've made a note to think about, do I, how am I going to sort of plot, not just plot out, but write the passage of time, really, because mine's over an 18-month period.
Right.
And the story kind of starts around just before Christmas, and then it goes up until September the following year.
Right.
Yeah, joining the army. And then I've noticed that I'm doing jumps, and I'm bringing the time, I'm scrunching the timeline closer.
Right. Yeah. And also for you, because it takes place specifically, you want this 18-month period, that might mean something in your story. Like, because they maybe say a character says, well, last Christmas, while you're in a Christmas, I don't know, I'm making this up, but you know what I mean? Like, maybe that's important. So you want to remember and make sure, it works.
Yeah.
Or for me.
That's such a good, I'm glad to be recording this. So I think this is when I'm going to watch back again, just to make sure that I write some more notes down, because
it's really, it's a lot of work, but my God, I love doing this so much. It does pay off. I love it so much. But all of this sort of very, meticulous thinking is really, really important, because it will make your book just move to the next level. Because how many books have we read sometimes just based on topic, and you're reading it like, what? Wait a minute, that didn't, and so it's really important. In mine, it's not a jump so far. It's really only going to be a couple of weeks. But what I realized, because I got lost in the timeline, I said it was a warm Indian summer, a warm summer, and then like the next chapter it was the middle
Storm.
of snow. Yeah, I'm not even lying. I was like, totally forgot about that. Suddenly it's freezing cold. I'm like, oh my God, because it's important. Like in mine, it was important. It's important that it's an Indian summer because some things happen that wouldn't happen or shouldn't happen with warm weather. So it can't be freezing cold the next week, right? As well as how your characters are dressing. Maybe it's important what they're wearing, right? Coat, no coat, or, whatever. And I mean, I'm going to start my notebook today, Hananya. I
recommend it. Notebook per project.
I think it's a great idea. Like I said, I did it for film. Goodness knows why. I didn't transfer. I feel like I'm like learning all over again, which is great. I mean, I have no issues with that, but it's really funny, but I think that's a really, really, really great idea. So at what point did you guys have anybody else read anything?
Like ever?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean the whole book. I mean, we did the coaching thing, so we know that, we have those, I don't know, we call them alpha readers or whatever.
But do you mean like
like
ever from your writing
from this story,
for
this story, like in general, like when you're writing a story, at what point, because like we kind of talked about, okay, sort of the very beginning, let it rest, then kind of read through, make your notes, attack the big things, and then some of those details. So let's, if Shameem is almost at that place where she's gone through it the first time and noted all that stuff. You're going to clean all that stuff up. Do you like to have someone read before you do then the next pass, which is a little more, grammar and making sure that, it's flowing and do you wait?
Well, as you know, I am in avoidance mode, so I will put off
sending it out as long as possible.
For as long as possible. But I have shared one chapter, or maybe two, from the beginning, from my first three, because they're I feel like they're the most polished.
Right.
Only with one person though, and I got good feedback. Yeah, but the person knows me and they like me, and I still have something in my head that, that's why I need to give it to somebody that's not in my circle, somebody that doesn't really care what I think, was not concerned about hurting my feelings. Because in the back of my mind, I will always think you're only saying that because you don't want to hurt my feelings. Or, if they said it was shit, then I'd believe it. But if they say it's good,
isn't that funny? But it's true. Yeah,
I know. So yes, I would like to polish before I go down that route. But I have read so many articles, trying to get my headspace into editing, and I've read like two different trains of thought where it's good to get beta readers or share it with some readers before you get to before you settle on the complete story, or before you get to that stage where you think it's finished, and to do it after, before and afterwards. So but I don't know, as a reader, I think if there's too many mistakes, and Hananya, I think you mentioned it when we last met, that you read something and it had too much that needed fixing, and then you can't focus on the actual reading because you're distracted by the mistakes. So there's a balance to be had there, isn't it?
Yeah, there really is. I feel like it's a struggle sometimes to know when to send it to people, because you're like, does it make sense enough for them to read it now? But the way that I've done it in the past is I've had just kind of someone that I knew read it after like my second draft, probably. I just did like, one read through of it and just send it out to someone. And that was someone that I knew, and I just kind of wanted to know, okay, well, do you kind of get the overall story? Is there anything that you're like, this feels weird, or anything that you want to see more of, like stuff like that? So very, very big picture stuff. And I've
but
also
is that
in the
like
past,
a reader friend, or is it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a reader, like an avid reader, and she read a lot of like historical books. So I was like, that's probably a good person to kind of have some feedback from. But it was very much a like just, general feedback. It wasn't, picking it out and being like, okay, well, this is, but I've also had, like, with my critique partner, I've also had that I've literally just sent her, I was like, I want to work on this story, but I'm stuck on it and I don't know what to do with it. And I know it's a first draft, so it's going to be really crap, but, and she's like, that's fine, I'll read it. So she read it and it was the first draft. So, like, obviously it wasn't great. Nothing was polished. Some of the chapters were literally like, one tiny little scene and then this and this and this happens, just notes to myself. I've literally just send over to her and I was like, this is kind of what I have and I want to fix it. I don't know how to fix it. And we just kind of brainstormed how to kind of rework it. But that sometimes if you're stuck with something, that can really help kind of get new perspective. But then I would more see that as like a critique partner that's really going to try and brainstorm it with you instead of like an actual beta reader, because a beta reader is supposed to be reading more or less kind of a draft that feels finished, even if it's not, even if it's not the final version, it should feel like a complete story. So you kind of want to be careful what stage, but there's multiple, I feel, in my opinion, there's multiple kind of people that you could send it to in different stages. And
I think that's important what you're saying, like at the early stage, like when you needed the brainstorming, and even if it's maybe let's say you think you have the right thing, if someone to tell you, do you have all the right scenes or whatever, but at that really early stage, you want to send it to someone who is also a writer,
who understands the structure and like all
exactly
that.
They can take it where you just have your cap notes going, oh, I think I'll have this scene here, whatever, and they don't get stuck on all of that because they know what they're reading for. So that's important. And then, like you said, once you've done a couple of drafts and feel like, there's still some things that may not be perfect, and maybe you don't have all the grammar, but you've got most of it, but the vast majority, whatever, it's very readable.
Exactly.
Then you can send it to a beta reader who is really there to tell you, is your story flowing? Are there big holes? Does this make sense or not make sense? It's a different level. But I could tell you right now, Shameem, you are the number one pupil, so you can push through this.
Definitely. I do want to mention one thing.
Oh, yes.
Shameem's going to have to get onto beta readers before we do the recording of that episode, by the way. So just giving you some homework. Otherwise, you don't have input to that episode.
I love it.
I could be the director.
She'll be the host of the show.
She's going to host that episode. It'll be Hananya and I on the panel.
For that episode, I can be Leslie.
Excuse me?
If you could see my heart going like that.
Oh, honey, it's going to be fine. We'll see how it goes. Okay, maybe we do this.
Switch it.
Well, we can talk about it a little bit offline for Shameem, who's freaking out. Maybe you see where you are, where we're getting closer, and maybe it's just a matter of sending someone a few chapters to begin, like chapters, whether you're struggling on them or whatever, to get a sense of some kind of feedback, because maybe that'll be better for you anyway, because you haven't done it before. We've done it before and lived through it. And then maybe that'll be a little bit easier. You know what I mean? So you just send 3, 4, 5 chapters, whatever. And get feedback on that first. And then you can talk about how that affects you.
How that went. Yeah.
And how it went. Okay.
Okay.
Does that seem fair?
I will consider all the options.
Good. Very politically correct answer.
Totally.
I still would like to put my hand up to be director of that episode.
Okay. Well, we will revisit this.
We'll discuss this in our housekeeping.
Exactly.
But first, a cup of coffee.
Thank you. Yes, first for coffee. You will live. Well, thanks for hanging out with us. Be sure to follow Hananya at Hananya LeClaire on Instagram and YouTube. Follow Shameem on Instagram at rnpinkhamauthor. And Leslie on Instagram at ld.feral.writer. Or catch all of us on YouTube at 3 Writing Amigas. Until our next hangout, keep on writing.